I'm Paul Bakke with Behavioral Sciences of Alabama with Dr. David Barnhart, and welcome to Minding the Gap, a podcast where we learn to use our minds in the gap between stress and response. Today, we're talking about avoidance, a trap that makes anxiety persist.
Yeah, so let's talk about how we can avoid the avoidance trap. We do that with the opposite of avoidance. In therapy, this is called exposure. We know exposure therapy is the gold standard for treating obsessive compulsive disorder and effectively treats disorders such as panic disorder, social anxiety, health anxiety, various phobias, and even generalized anxiety disorder. Exposure therapy uses systematic strategies to teach clients to tolerate these feelings of anxiety triggered by situations and intrusive thoughts.
And many of these triggering situations, intrusive thoughts, events, they're not dangerous, but our brains treat them as danger. A rude remark, speaking in public, joining a group for the first time, using a public toilet, taking a math quiz, those aren't dangerous. But they may feel like it, but we need to be able to use a public restroom. We may need to take a quiz to complete a course. We may encounter a rude remark. We're left with a choice of how to respond. When we avoid or quickly leave those situations because we feel anxiety, we strengthen that avoidance response. Avoidance reduces anxiety, but strengthens the tendency to avoid situations that also reduces our ability to function.
So there are dangerous situations. Years ago, I was in the Smoky Mountains and I came upon a bear foraging between the cabins on Mount LeConte. I slowly backed out of the bear's line of sight around the cabin. My heart rate and respiration jumped immediately. I felt the adrenaline released as my sweat glands responded. My body was ready to move. The speed with which the sensory thalamus and amygdala respond to threats amazes me, maybe 40 milliseconds. The threat signal also goes to the thinking part of the brain, the prefrontal cortex, where we can evaluate, decide, and downregulate our fight or flight response on occasion. But that process can take much longer, maybe 400 to 500 milliseconds. Most situations don't threaten our immediate health and safety, as a bear may, even though they may feel dangerous.
And because avoidance or leaving a scary situation results in a drop in our fear, the behavior of avoidance strengthens through what we call negative reinforcement, or doing something to avoid something negative. And there's also a release of dopamine, which makes us feel better. So negative reinforcement and the force of I avoided this bad thing and I feel better, that springs the avoidance trap. So you could think of this as a reward for avoidance. Immediate feedback and a decrease in discomfort, those are two powerful combinations to break.
Yes. Well, intellectually, we may know situations such as meeting people for the first time, speaking in public, or taking a test aren't inherently dangerous, but the false alarm of anxiety tells us otherwise. If we repeatedly face our fears, our brains can habituate or learn an interfering behavior. Then the anxiety drops and we lose our fear.
So we want our listeners to work on facing exaggerated fears in small steps with the help of a friend. That's too overwhelming. Seek help from a cognitive behavioral therapist trained in exposure and response prevention. They can develop a plan with you that breaks exposure into small steps so you're more likely to face fears and stay out of the avoidance trap. Thanks for listening. Subscribe, like, rate, and review. Share it with a friend. And remember, when you're triggered by stress, use your mind in the gap.